The most influential Broadway musical of all time opens the new season of shows at ASU Gamage. West Side Story comes to the Valley September 27th through to October 2nd. And to talk to us now about the show is one of the cast members, Dea Julian. Good morning, Dea. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm great, thanks. How are you?
It's great to talk to you. I understand you're a little to the south of us at the moment down in Tucson, but you're coming to the Valley pretty soon.
That we are.
Actors that I've talked to in the past who have performed in a production of West Side Story have often said it changed their lives. Has West Side Story changed your life?
I think it has. I think that there's no way that you can get through this show every night without being changed in some way, just because, not only because of the subject matter, which, love, hate, violence, bigotry are things that anybody unfortunately can relate to, but also even being exposed to the music every night, being able to dance this amazing choreography and being part of something so important and beautiful, it definitely changes you.
Did you grow up knowing about the show?
For some reason, had never seen the movie and had never seen a stage production. So really, I came into this rehearsal process completely fresh and just kind of going off of the script in front of me.
Wow. So were you surprised when you found out just how big an influence the show has been on American musical theater?
Well, I mean, I did have a knowledge of its importance and its influence. I was just kind of unfamiliar with some of the songs. So I think it was just great to be in it and learn about it at the same time,
Right. Well, how did the touring production come your way? Was it a long audition process? Did you have to wait a long time, or did things move pretty fast?
Well, it's different for everybody. I was actually up for the Broadway production a couple years back and got very far in that process. And then when they were casting the tour, they just called me up, and I went in and sang for David, director, and Arthur Lawrence, and the music director and all the producers. And I found out the next day that I'd gotten the part. So for me, it was pretty painless, but I know many other people had to go through weeks of dance auditions and lots of different things. So
right, that's actually
pretty quick.
That's one of the fastest I've ever heard. Actually, the very next
definitely.
day. Yeah. Have you? So you've been with the tour from the beginning?
Yes, I have.
How about life on the road? Something I always like to ask a performer in a touring production, because not everyone likes to be so far away from home so often. How are you handling it?
Life on the road is really great and hard and wonderful. I think some of the challenges, of course, are being away from home and adjusting to different climates every week or every couple of weeks. That's certainly a challenge, but at the same time, it's kind of the best way to see the country you could ever ask for. And I've learned so much about our country seeing it and being able to perform for different audiences and getting very different responses based on where we are. So I think it's been really interesting, and I actually love it.
Well, good. Well, you play Rosalia, which means I think you get to perform both I Feel Pretty and America. Is that right? Those two songs?
I know. It's so great. Yeah.
How exhausting is it singing and dancing and wearing high heels at the same time?
Well, it takes stamina for sure. But I think that as long as you really take care of yourself and make sure you stay healthy, you kind of develop an endurance from doing the show. And somehow, even if that day you're tired, you get out on stage and it just happens because it has to,
Right. Well, I think, am I right, Dea, that you're also in the dance at the gym, that whole sequence. Yeah. So that in itself is exhausting because you have several different styles of rhythms all within a sort of a 10-minute period. That must wear you out as well.
Well, it's it's certainly a cardiovascular exercise, but I love it because I'm not, I didn't start dancing when I was little, and I'm not as much of a trained dancer as the majority of our dancers on this tour. So I never really imagined that I would get to dance West Side Story. So really being on stage and getting to do this choreography has been such an unexpected joy of this production that honestly I can't complain.
Really? Now, part of your homework when looking up West Side Story, did you get to see the film version?
I watched bits and pieces of it, but I decided, especially during the rehearsal process, that I didn't want to watch it just to make sure that I kind of had my own thoughts and ideas about this story and this production. And I haven't yet, but when I get home, I definitely plan on watching it.
Well, the reason I asked that, Dea, was the film version has both the boys and the girls singing
Yes.
America, but the stage
Yes.
version, it's just the girls. And I've always wondered about that. How different do you think that makes the presentation of the song? Do you think it's stronger when it's just between the girls as it is in the stage version?
I do, because I feel that the reason that, I mean, America is such a joyful, powerful number because it's really about women celebrating their power. And this is the way that, the men, to get out their, whatever they're feeling inside, their passion, their aggression, the way they're dealing with this new world, is they fight. And these women, in order to get out whatever they're feeling, they dance, and it becomes this joyful thing, and it's a way for them to exert their power, for Anita to exert her power over Bernardo, but in general for the Shark girls to get to celebrate themselves, even as Anita and Rosalia are kind of having this little argument. So I definitely think that it's more of a statement of power for the women if they're on stage together.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this particular production has some differences from what we may have seen before. Can you think of anything that might seem new to someone who perhaps has seen West Side Story several times, and now they're going to be faced with something, oh my gosh, I've never seen that?
One of the things that I can think of is the inclusion of the Spanish has certainly been controversial both on Broadway and in our tour. And people have had very different reactions to it. And I personally think that it was a really bold and interesting move on Arthur's part to include the Spanish because it kind of levels the playing field in a way. You get to see the Sharks communicate in their own language as they would. And then, so if you understand it, you feel like you're a part of their world. And if you don't understand the language, of course you can glean what's happening from the gestures, and, it's pretty easy to follow. But it also helps you understand the lack of communication between these two gangs that's really creating all of this turmoil.
When you arrive in town at a new theater and you're on stage that you've never been to before, for instance, right now you're down in Tucson, next week you're going to be on a different stage up here at ASU Gamage. Is there a moment of adjustment or do you just dive headfirst into the new surroundings?
We have an orientation and a sound check about 2.5 hours before the show, each new city. So we get to be on stage and warm up on stage and look out, and certainly the way the houses are even shaped and the way the lights are placed kind of impact your performance in terms of where you see center as being in terms of staging. So that can take a little while to get used to, but we do have that time period beforehand to adapt a little bit. And then once you get on stage, it's just about the differences are kind of feeling the audience, and sometimes they're very far away from you, sometimes they're close. So it takes maybe a few minutes to just feel it out, and then it's back to normal.
Right. Well, the stage at ASU Gamage is enormous, so it can certainly incorporate everything you brought. But I was wondering, have you been to an area where perhaps you've turned up on stage and they've said, hey, we can't fit this piece of equipment in, or we may have to trim this a little bit. It just can't cater to us.
We actually have. There has been a couple of theaters where not the house itself, but the backstage area is pretty tight. So we've had to cut a couple of set pieces that aren't important. For example, in I Feel Pretty, there's a bed that comes on stage with a door attached to it in the back, and sometimes we've had to cut the door, or there'll have been a drop that we can't fit through. So there, every time we get to a new theater, there are some minor adjustments that we have to make in order to make it work.
Well, my final question, I got to tell you, by the way, Dea, West Side Story is, for me, the greatest of all musicals. I'm one of those that have seen it many, many times and saw the movie. I remember my father took me as a gift when I was 7 years old to see it on a huge, one of those huge curved IMAX-style screens in 62 or 61, somewhere around there. Yeah. So, I have many favorite parts. But tell me, last question, do you have a favorite moment in the show?
Well, I'm going to answer that in two ways. My favorite moment that I am a part of is getting to do America with Michelle Arvena, who plays Anita. It's just such a thrill to do that every night, and I never, ever get tired of it. It's just so beautiful and wonderful to get to be a part of.
You're right. It absolutely is.
Yeah, it really is. And my favorite moment in the show is A Boy Like That, I Have a Love.
Oh, right. The almost the argument between Anita and Maria.
And Maria, I think it's so beautiful that it's one moment in the show where you have two people coming from such opposite points of view in terms of what has just happened, and you go through their struggle and you are able to watch them find common ground. And I think that that's one of the only times in the show where that happens. So I think that's really beautiful to watch, and the music is just gorgeous.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you've said. Well, once again, West Side Story opens at ASU Gamage September 27th next week. And don't forget about our Talkback Thursday. Now, this is where, after the Thursday evening performance on the 29th, the audience is invited to stay after the show and meet some of the cast. I don't know if they'll be able to meet you, Dea, that night, but if you volunteer, we'll say hi next Thursday evening. There's a there's a Q&A session that follows on Thursday, and it's co-hosted by yours truly. So I'll see you there. But
great.
Dea, thanks for talking to us, and I cannot wait to see you on stage at Gamage next week.
Oh, great. Thanks so much for having me.